Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wednesday's Live. This is, I guess you'd call it installment 3 in our project to learn to see a subject like an artist sees it. And this one, I think, will build very nicely on the two that we've previously done. Just like the lily pond, there are colors that are shot through underneath the darks. We have a lovely, that tawny ochre tan color. There's even some of that in the base of the sky. And when we paint it, you'll see I'll go from blue, I'll switch to that tan, I'll paint through everything here. And then we'll begin to superimpose the other colors on top of that. We also have a nice opportunity to do the cursive darks thing that we did with the Stonehenge subject. We could begin with these darks here, sneak across, maybe change the color a little bit, green to maybe a brown, sneak down here into some blues, that kind of thing, and then into this bigger shape there. So all of that stuff we've done before, we're going to do. Now, this looks busy. I know that. There's, all these seats and all this stuff. But if we look for the giant shapes, the big shapes, I think it'll make it a whole lot easier. I turned it into a black and white image. And you can see we've got kind of this big, dark, medium, and light. The sky is virtually the same. It's a little bit darker, but it's almost the same value as the ground and the sides of the buildings, the illumination. So we can easily accomplish that small difference there when we paint it. But we've got a big wedge of dark cutting across here, and then we've got this shape that's sort of, I don't know, whatever it reminds you of. It's kind of a big comma, and then it goes like that. And then these little bits are attached to it. So we don't want to get lost in all of this stuff in here, these windows and openings and things like that. All those things are made or seen because the light is getting or not getting to those places. So I said this was a Roman amphitheater in Barcelona. Actually, Barcelona's a little further up the coast. This is in Tarragona. We're looking, let's see, that's the northeast part of Spain. I think the light is coming in at a bit of an angle like that. This would be morning, and judging by that, I'd say maybe 10-ish, something in that vicinity there. So the light is the thing it is defining these things for us. Since they're also similarly colored, if we were looking at noon, it probably would all kind of bleach out together. So the draw on this is actually not all that hard. The first thing we do, we've got about nice thirds. The horizon, the Mediterranean here, and all this will I'll darken them later on. I'm going to put about maybe the top third there. Now this is, you can see that's horizontal. This is ever so slightly pitched towards it, and it's about at the 3/4 mark. So, and this brings us almost to about the halfway point. And if we look for these big lines, that'll help us. So we can adjust those later. Now we've got a big line here. It's not a complete straight line. It goes and then dives at about the 3rd point. So hi Patty, how are you? So I'm gonna, and then that's, almost to the halfway mark. These things can be intimidating, but look for those reference points that'll help us find these things. There's a Z. Boom, boom, boom. You can't fail with a Z. I'm going to bring this back across. And there are some buildings, which maybe I'll leave some whites in there. We'll see. There's a line through here. There's a lot of ways we could... Hi, Kathleen. There's a lot of ways we could approach getting this shape in here of the amphitheater. This was... I looked it up, and it was one of the... it wasn't like a drama theater. It was a gladiatorial type place. You could complete the ellipse in your eye, or you could just look for that stops about the halfway point, and kind of whatever helps. If you see a curve, I tend to go for the ellipse, which is not completely there. We're going to lose some of that. And of course, I can erase all these things that I don't want a little later. If you see this shark's tooth shape in there, that'll help. There is the nosebleed seats up here. I think I'll indicate them. There's a line that's a bit of a, not dead horizontal, it's a little bit downhill here where this street is, or will be. All these things, I'm finding the bigger lines to not get lost drawing individual items. And maybe that's, as we're discussing that, maybe that's a good, so this is a little halfway here. This building here is kind of a little bit to the left of the halfway mark, and it's just a cube. There's another building coming in here. Its roof line is a little lower than that roof line. That's relative seeing. This would be a good place to talk about how we do in fact see, and why it is that people get into trouble when they see like a civilian and not like an artist. Because the artist sees relationally, and just regular folks tend to see stuff, individual items. When you see, there are actually two seeing activities going on. One is what actually presents to your eyeball, the stuff that hits your eyeball and what you see in your field of vision, which is, in this case, this and what we're trying to reproduce and paint. The other thing is what happens behind your eyeball, which is a neurochemical event in your brain. And those two fields of vision are a little bit different. Your front of the eyeball field of vision sees what's there. Something to the left is to the left, something to the bottom is to the bottom. Everything's placed in the entire scene where it is. Now, the neurochemical event that occurs behind your eyeball in your brain, that's a little different. When you look over here, everything in that field of vision tends to be centered and filling it. So if you're looking at this, that building over here, which is this big in the eyeball field of vision, in that neurochemical internal field of vision, it's about yay big. If you look at the window, the building fills the whole thing and the window is this big. So you have to be aware of that, and when you're going to draw, switch back and notice where is it relative to something else. Where is it? Well, that's the most. How many times have I talked about that? Where is it is the most important thing. Next is how big is it? And if you're trying to be, for all, what we call realistic, whatever that means, you want to get the position of the thing correct above all else. You want to get the size of it right too. Those things, if it looks off, it's going to be because those things are off. So I'm just looking at this shape in here, I'm squinting. It's actually almost an abstract shape. These are all kind of abstract shapes if you think about them. Now, where does this start? Where does that stop? That interior shadow shape. If it helps, just draw the shapes the size they are in the place they are. That'll get you there. The interesting thing is, if you are pretty good at where it is, and you've got it about the right size, it's going to look right. You don't have to get the exact shape of it, and you don't have to get the exact color of it. The position and the size have to be correct, but you have some leeway with the shape and the color, and they only have to be beautiful. They don't have to be correct, for whatever that's worth. So, I've got a big dark tree coming in here, and I like that. It's sort of, I might bring it down a little further than where it actually is, as if I were taller, to kind of anchor this end. This, that dives a bit. There is a built T-shaped, or the remains of a T-shaped building in here, and if you can visualize a T-shaped cube, I guess, then that'll help. But if you can't, that's okay. Just look for your shapes. Some trees over here. I think I'm starting to get my positions good, so I'm going to start to darken some of these lines. Beach, more trees here. Attached to the outside of this curve of the amphitheater are some more, I don't know, maybe this is the press box. Hello, Jackie. The equivalent of the press box. And they're basically triangles. This, let's see, I'm going to have to tilt this a bit. There is a stair step. Well, I guess it's not stair steps, is it? It's seats. So since that's closer to us, and I'm going to call these the nosebleed seats. In the past two projects, I've been trying to not call things by their object name. I've been just trying to describe them as shapes. But today, I'm going to give us a break and say we can call these things what they are. There's a little octopusy type. To me, it looks like the body of an octopus. Dark shape. There's a Looks like where the gladiators come in here. Now there's a nice line here. It looks like a, who knows what, a bit of a shadow, let's see, bit of a shadow there, some curve there. Now I can look at this shape. What does that remind me? I'm going to draw it as shadow shapes. I think I drew that one a little big. Again, and this is a subject where a lot of times I like to try to paint my cast shadows on the fly so they look very fresh and everything. This one I think is going to be a good candidate for drawing the shapes and then painting them. Now, let's grab a eraser and start taking out any lines that we need to change as we're adjusting here. A lot of drawing here. I'll need to sharpen this. Hello, Dwight. You've been doing some really nice stuff lately. I've been enjoying looking at it. Okay. Just taking my time and seeing these abstract shapes. And again, if you don't get them in exactly the right shape, if you get them pretty close to where they're at, you're 99% of the way there. And it's going to read like whatever that thing actually is. Now there's some of these little ones here that are, if you're having difficulty placing them, then feel free to just say, okay, this is lower than that. Good, that's lower. So, is it about the same height as this? Yes. Okay. So, just find them and to the best of your ability, come up with the position first, the size next. There's a lot of railings in business and stuff like that that I don't think we really need. There's some small darks. That's why I kind of like this tree. I'm going to put it in over here to anchor this. Now, another way you could do it is you could say, is this a fifth, a sixth, a whatever, half, quarter, somewhere between a quarter and an eighth. Well, I guess that would be, wouldn't it? Start out with a parallelogram and then modify it to make it what it is. little over, halfway up, an arch shape. That needs to come further over that I drew here, so I'll just duplicate it. Which will give me a little more length on this shape. And I can modify that. Okay, starting to find my stuff. A lot of this stuff, there's a little, I understand why a lot of these watercolorists love to go to Spain and Italy and places like that and don't hang out in Des Moines too much or Cedar Rapids, because you got that hard Mediterranean light, you got the narrow streets, the tall buildings. It just makes all your painting work a heck of a lot easier than what we have to do when we get out there in those bean fields, which I noticed are starting to turn yellow around here. First week of September and they're turning yellow. I'm not worrying about any windows yet. I'm just getting treat the buildings like a Kleenex box or something that came from UPS or Amazon. I might harden or darken up some of these lines where the shadow will be. Oh, look at that lovely. Okay. Now there are things within here that I am going to lose in the shadow and then find a bit later. So this has to come up, that shape. In other words, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a big shape in here first. Hi, Judy. And then I'm maybe selectively pick out some darker darks within that. The main thing I want to get. There's a lot of action down in here, which I don't think is worth going after because it's kind of too close to the corner of the painting. I generally prefer to see something that's a little more innocuous or not so specific at that part of the painting, the corners. Corners should always be a little bit different, which means I'll want to try and gradate that blue a bit. This corner has this oddball shape. Oops. This corner has the buildings. Maybe I'll put a couple cranes in there. Construction in downtown Tarragona. And then, hi Catherine. Windows, those sorts of things, that's all going to happen after we got our big shapes in. So, it's all about shapes. The brush will only make brush marks. It won't make buildings or faces or any of that sort of thing. So we have to look at the world and try and interpret it in terms of marks that we know we can make with a brush or and then what happens is no two of us we'll do that the same. And then voila, you've got your painting style. Okay, I think we're just about ready to do some painting. A lot of these railings, which were things that were put in before, or after, we might do a little bit of that down here. We'll see. That can easily go in at the end, because the darks will go over the lights. I just need to know where to stop with my lights. That's the biggie for the moment. Okay. Okay. Now, just like we did in the first one, the lily or the lotus pond project, to look for those colors that kind of in the light passages, in the medium passages, that sort of shoot through front to back. I'm definitely seeing some kind of tawny ochre kind of color. Very little here in the sky, then it becomes more here, and then actually gets maybe a little orangier sienna through here, and I'll paint through that. Paint underneath those shadows. I might preserve some whites up in here, we'll see. So the first thing I have to do is mix up 2 good-sized puddles. One blue. I'm going to just make puddles of water in here first. These will be runny paint. And good old yellow ochre for one. It's going to be you could literally paint this with yellow ochre, alizarin crimson, and a blue. We'll try that. Let's see if we can get away with that. Now for my blue, I'm just going to use ordinary ultramarine. I might green it up a bit, or purpley it up a bit. Official art term there. Oh, let's see. I better make it a little lighter and a bigger puddle. So here we go. So I'm going to go with the cerulean. Cerulean and ultramarine. It really, again, this is the kind of thing I said, that the position of the things has to be right, their size has to be right, but their shape, not so much. Their color merely has to be beautiful. You could take this into a whole different palette if you wanted to. And it would still read if you get these big, wonderful shapes. You could make it very pale and earthy toned, or, not very subdued. You could make it very vibrant and rich. That's the style aspect of the thing. Okay, here we go. Going to start with the blue. Get a good bead going. Pick it up. Got the bead waiting for me so I can rinse this really good. And now, starting with my yellow, picking up underneath. Rinse that good, because it's got some blue in it. Get some yellow. Notice I'm going to hit everything, except maybe some whites up around here, or here or there. I'm going yellow underneath. The water. Because you can see it's a greener blue than that blue back there. So when we put the water in. Now into this yellow ochre, I'm going to start mixing some alizarin to make it, that's sort of the poor man's burnt sienna. And I'm particularly going to put a bit of it in, and it might look a little bit funny and pinkish now. But when that dries, it's going to be significantly lighter. So, and it will have the effect. So we've got a kind of a tea rose color there. This is, again, runny paint. You can see it running. Of a color progression from blue to yellow to red-ish. And whenever our eye discerns a progression or a change, it assumes space or time. Subconsciously, but whatever. Okay, so there we go. We're going to dry this now. Blue to a yellow to a... So maybe if I'm lucky, we can wind up with something that looks a little earlier than what we're actually looking at. So cover your ears, here comes the hairdryer. Okay, now, you notice that on this black and white version, it worked out rather nicely that the Mediterranean was medium. It's medium-terranean. And then all this other stuff is dark, and mostly the sky and the sunlit portions come up a lovely strong darks. So for the first, and since I'm painting smaller areas, I am going to use a slightly, well, not too much smaller, but stiffer brush to get in here. So I'm going to put some ultramarine into that mix I used for the sky. So, because I'm bringing in more pigment, it's going to get a little darker. Now, let's do a tester. Yeah, it looks about right. Okay, what I'm going to... No, nah, let's not be fancy. Pull that line in such a way as you can make it as flat as you can. Seems to be a sort of a jog there. Bring that to about here. And I'm going to start working a little bit of yellow ochre into it, or some turquoise. to get a greener blue. Working off a wet edge here. Let's actually put more yellow in there. Get a greener blue. Again, when the eye discerns a change, it assumes time or space. Let's get down here to the press box. And then I'm going to switch to maybe a little bit of turquoise. Right at the water's edge there. I'm not going to try and get, well, we'll see later. I don't want to get fancy and try to do cresting waves or anything because that's out to the edge of the picture and I don't want to draw the attention off the frame. So if you wanted to get fancy a little later when the glisten has gone off here, hey cuz, how you doing? You could come in with stiffer blue and get those soft breakers there. Now, because this is wet, I don't want to start painting darks in here. Well, I could. Yeah, I can. Into that mix. No, let's stick with our mediums. Let's stick with our mediums. Into that mix that I was using that I made redder down here, I'm going to just use that same pairing, yellow ochre and the alizarin crimson, to get a sort of a terracotta flesh kind of color. See a little bit of a roof here. Some items here and there. So I think another reason that, now anything that's darker, like these trees, those there, you don't have to worry if you get in, get into those areas because that darker color is going to cover them right up. I'm going to make it significantly redder, more of the alizarin. Going to try and grab this lovely tiled roof, which I think is another reason painters are all crazy about going to these places. See if we can get a couple more of those back there. So I've got a dull terracotta color back here. I've got a zippier terracotta color as I'm coming forward. Once again, eye discerns a change. It assumes space or time. Maybe back to a little bit paler version of that, more yellow ochreish. I'm just going to pull a couple of, I don't want to make a big deal out of the architectural detailing on that. I'm going to generalize it some. Again, it's by the edge of the picture and I don't want to make too big a deal out of that. So what I'm doing is I'm painting medium values here. I think we're dry enough over here that I could, put it's either riprap or sand on the beach there. I think it would be fun to just within this area, if you squint. Roxy, how you doing? that is, whoops, come back. That is a little darker than the lit parts, the general admission seating there. I am going to put a little bit of that, what I was just using there, this terracotta color, and some of the blue, and I'm going to underpaint that area there. That's a good color for under here too. There's a shade from the trees. And I'll just peter it out as I get in here. I'm going to leave some bright spots for those little highlights that the light is catching. And we'll just kind of break through this general area here and there with this neutral that's made of these, with a triad palette. What's really nice is you've got a lot of, it's surprising how many kind of colors you can come up with. But it's a very easy thing to find the mix that you had previously come up with if you need it again. And you don't have to fish around and, boy, did I use this? Did I use that? But the reason I'm doing this, maybe make a little redder version of this, purplish. Yeah, explain what you're doing, John. So that underneath this, it doesn't look flat. Again, if there's some variation, then it will appear to be in a different space. Let's throw a little bit of that in there too, a little in there. This big dark, we don't worry too much about that because that's going to be its own thing. I might even here underpaint. Well, you could underpaint some of these darks shapes with a hot color and then bring your reds and yellows and then bring your blue over top of it later after it's dry, and it would look really nice. But I'm going to just go with the simpler case on this one. So we don't get too many things going at once. Now, I want to dry this. So, Lori Lee runs the gallery in Mount Pleasant, where I'll be having an opening tomorrow night, 5 to 7. If you're in town, come in and say hey. It's on the east side of the square in Mount Pleasant. Now, I'm going to start with here we come with our darks. And this is where we're also going to do that cursive thing that we were doing last week with the Stonehenge, where we start a shape as if this were a word and we paint it together rather than painting little separate things, individual things like we were printing it. I'm going to take that blue that I've been using, get more of it, and that may mean, so this is going to be slow moving now. When I rinse my brush, I have to remember to blot it as well, because we need to not bring more water to this darker mix. Maybe I'll go into the Prussian to get a darker kind of blue. I'm going to cut across here, pick up these trees and some of the dark shadows in there. So I will be adding in a little more blue, a little more ochre, a little more whatever, and getting a little darker as I come forward. I don't want it quite as dark as it might be, so that again, if the value shifts front to back, it will help us give the illusion of space. So, trees. Leaving little white skips to suggest buildings. Probably vacation type things. Okay, I'm going to put a little more blue in it. Maybe even a little bit of the alizarin to get it sort of purplish. So you can do start and stop. Keep it a sequence. And that will be like the cursive. We were writing one word and then we write the next word. But the individual words, the letters connect to one another. Okay. Now let's put a little more again, this is slower moving, but it's not the darkest stuff I'm going to use. Start another word. I'm going to put a little yellow ochre into that mix to get it more ochreish, greenish. Because I'm getting closer in space to where we're at. Where we're at. The foreground, in other words. Sheesh. I'm going to start throwing a little more, maybe a bit more of the red and the yellow ochre into that to get a sort of a brownish, reddish, green, more of a dry climate foliage, or like what we have right now. Now just above this, so I'm coming down into here, I'm going to stab right into my ultramarine for a slow-moving mix, and I'm going to touch places in there. So I'm not changing my value so much, I'm changing my color. I'm going to get the side of the, there's a couple of buildings back here, the west side of which is in shade, and it's a dark of basically the same value as the trees. So back to our reddish, ochreish green. Nice big tree right here. And I want these edges to be soft and melt together. In other words, things of a like value passage, I want to very definitely melt together. Got some of that over here too. Enlarge that one a bit. Now, blot that back to the ultramarine mix, slow-moving ultramarine. Maybe we'll even throw a little bit of the alizarin in it to get it purpley. This is the shade cast by that tree. So any darker or colored bits will be to the left side of the object because our light is coming in from the, let's even throw a bit up there, yeah. Light's coming in from the right, from the east. I'm going to suggest some cast shadows under the trees. And then maybe even some trunks. May even start in on some of my shadows. So here, if you didn't tune in last week, and this when I'm talking about cursive, when I start a dark color, I continue a shape. It's a shadow passage. So I'm coming across, and tying my darks together, just the way letters in a cursive alphabet will connect with one another. And then maybe you'll pause and skip and move on to the next word, so to speak. Yeah, we're getting down to our, there's a, put a little water in that, and I'm just gonna, sort of well, last 2 weeks I was trying not to say what things are, but this week we will. It's like a parking garage or a walkway under there. When the windows go in on these things, that's when they're really going to start looking like buildings, but we don't want to get carried away with that yet. Big shapes or big passages first. Now, how about that tree that's coming in from stage left? I want to see that. So, yellow ochre, maybe my Prussian blue. We're going to use a couple of blues today to bash in that big shape. I like the way it anchors the left side of the picture. And it's kind of a pendant or counterbalance to the big darks on this side. Now, likewise with that, I'm going to stab into my ultramarine and maybe a little bit of the alizarin to get a eggplant purple color. And I'm going to suggest the shady bits on the left and bottom of that tree. Okay, so hopefully you can see this thing starting to occur. Now, I think it's going to be easier for me to go right to left with these so that I don't rub my hand in this on my way over there. And the other thing is, I think it's easier to move from a smaller shape to a big shape when you're painting a shape passage. So just like here, I went from the smaller darks to the bigger darks and finished up there. This mix is going to be there. I'm going to try to avoid the yellow in these. Although if you do look, if you want to get really fancy, like a cast shadow like this with reflected light into the back into the wall, you could put it in with the bluer color and then charge it with some yellow ochre on this edge. Or put a yellow ochre, mix two very close colors and put this one and then that one if you want to get fancy. But you'll notice there's not so much of that over here. This is very bluish violetish, which is another reason I wanted to go why it looks gorgeous just the way it is. There's a greenish blue and then we have a purplish blue, and the two of them, they sit in different spaces and they just are a joy to look at. So now, so I want ultramarine, and this is going to have to be very slow moving and a good bit of it. So, and some alizarin. Now that's probably a little darker than what I want for over here, so I am going to throw just a bit of water into it. Just tip the brush in there. And so when you're trying to judge your colors like that, that's another good reason to start with the smaller shapes. Because if you don't get it where you need it, it's easier to fix it in a little place or ignore it in a little place rather than try to repair a giant area. So let's get the whole thing into view here. Tester. Let's go with that one. A little dark, a little dark. More water. And maybe more red. You know, and if it looks too grizzly purple, then you throw in a little bit of the yellow ochre, which is the yellow complements purple, and that takes the some of the vividness out of it. So let's try. There's an obvious one. Oh, that archway. Yeah, that's about the degree of darkness I want. And come across, doggone it. Get these shapes here. Again, like I said, we don't have to be like aerospace accurate with these shapes. We do have to be fairly accurate as to where they are and how big they are. And that's what I was talking about when I say if you let your vision go to any one spot, what you see in your mind's eye is going to enlarge and fill the whole frame of your mind's eye, as opposed to whatever little corner it does in your eyeball field of vision. So now I'm going to tackle this one. Let's make it redder and yellower. Oh, gee, hey, there we go. That's a nice, dull, weird color. And we've got a jog and some. If you don't get a straight edge here, that's good because this is ruined stuff. And who's going to know, right? I mean, unless they're right there. Now, bluer, or maybe a little lighter. Let's see what we get here. Now we're getting into our bigger shape. So I'm just going to sort of peter it out. I got some natural stopping points. I'm always looking for stopping points. Little bits like that. Now I know there's probably some leave some seating areas in there like that. But the big thing I want to get is where this nearly connects to that. If I can, maybe I can, trying to leave a little skinny line, maybe suggest that railing or whatever. It wasn't there in the 1st century or whenever this was initially built. Let's come and get our nosebleed seats. There's that stair step. Connects there, comes forward, and then goes down into this. I'm going to keep a nice wet edge here because this is where I'm going into the big part of the shape. Lots of ultramarine, lots of, well, not lots, but a fair amount of alizarin to get kind of purplish. A little bit of water. And then I'm going to try to miss that spot and that spot. Okay, here we go. Keep a nice wet edge there. You can usually let's get in there with some of our other colors. That green that I was using before, and just kind of modify this a bit while it's still wet, so to kind of mottle, M-O-T-T-L-E, the shape, or variegate the value. That would probably be the better word. Now, I'm going to put more of the alizarin, maybe a touch of the yellow ochre. Let's see. Right in here, it's very dark. Let's throw some darker darks into the mix. But I want them to melt in. I don't want them to be too specific. Like, for example, the side of the nosebleed seats there. Because that's a little drier now, I can come back and get this bit there. And I can, oh, I should have got up in here. The press box. There's a dark shape on the other side of that. And then we've got that shape, the jellyfish, octopus, whatever it appeared to be. So as I put these in, they'll melt a bit, or I hope they will. And form that. Now there seems to be some sort of darker spot there where you, I don't know, I'm going to guess that's where they bring in the lines or the Christians, whichever one. So. Down here we've got some, I'm going to put a bit of water into that and maybe get a bit of the green to dull it down a bit. And just throw in some occasional lines like that where I think I see things like, I guess they're kind of ramps or something, which have gone in after the fact. Who knows? While that's drying, I am going to, you know, we probably would have a little bit of shade coming, well, maybe not. Light's coming in from that direction. Oh well. As long as it looks quasi-plausible. Okay, now, I'm going to get a small brush, and this is it, we're closing in. Let's put a little more red in that and a little more yellow ochre just to get kind of a neutral dark and a fair amount of water. This is going to be more along the lines of a kind of a medium value again, and I'm going to suggest some windows here, balconies. Oh, let's change it. Don't make 10 of the same thing. Something redder, browner as we go down to the I put some little things there. Who knows? These windows here on, well, you know what? There's some interesting, what I just used, and a good bit more water. We've got a front face to some of these things that is ever so slightly darker than its surroundings. Just going to suggest that. Bit of that coming through here too. Oh, there appears to be a couple more little arches where the gladiator guys came out. So So they're kind of a half moon shape or a fingernail shape, because our light is coming in from stage right. Lines. These windows here, rather than paint a square, sevens. Stylized sevens. Oh yeah, there's a little dark down here somewhere, isn't there? Guess I'm going to have to make my beach a little more beachy. Get some of that turquoise, dull turquoise, and a fair amount of water. Okay, now let's just take some of that blue mix. Maybe try to suggest our soft waves. Always take those things off the page to suggest the space. A little more of that back there. Something there. And I guess that does work. That whatever it is, it's probably some sort of stairway to wherever they kept the animals or something.
Where they throw the dead body.
Yeah. The morgue, the mortuary or whatever. Okay, so a little more dark in there. In there. In there. Okay, now this, I want to see this dry, I think. There does seem to be some sort of very pale cast shadow and slightly cast shadow here. Yeah, don't get too crazy here. He says as he starts to get crazy. Dark purple, that's subdued. Some of these things are quite dark within the darks. So oh, dare I do it? some kind of entrance here. Basically, that'd be a good place for your signature. Just to enliven the area without really doing anything too fancy to it. What are we looking at? Okay, I see some kind of hopefully that'll dry later. We'll see. I probably should have not have done that. Oh well. A little bit of darkness at the edge of the beach. This is a good place to peel and see what we got. Maybe that will tell us something. Oops. As I look at it, I think the entire sea, or the Mediterranean there, could be a bit darker. I'm going to glaze it with a bit of runny turquoise. Leave just a tad bit of the previous color behind. Yeah, I think I like that a little better. I think I might even use some of that back here. Always seems like a bit of turquoise at the horizon suggests distance. And maybe just a bit of a dark line. I did simplify this a lot, and maybe I should have made it even simpler still. I think I want a little bit of an eve there. And there's my boo-boo. That shouldn't be that. It shouldn't go up over. The dark goes all the way to the top. Yeah, that's better. And there is a strong dark area in here. And there isn't a light spot there, so that's better.
There's a dark spot right above that. I don't know, maybe I'm just seeing it like here and here.
Yeah, that's this one.
Okay.
widen it, yeah. And that's where the concession guys go, I bet. Wonder what they had for concession.
I'm not quite sure what they were bringing, but eyeballs.
You know, you can just imagine, can't you?
Yeah, but that's based on
Some crazy thing, who knows?
some filmmaker or something.
Yeah. Goat on a stick or something like.
Yeah.
But okay, so the idea is I don't want to get, when you're painting something in hard light, it's usually a good idea to keep your detail in the shadow or in the light areas, but not both. So since we've done it in the shadow areas, then I think we need to kind of continue with that and maybe on the other side of the buildings there. Make the tops of the sevens a little darker, but not everywhere. Okay, let's leave it alone. So the point I wanted to get across today was that seeing that big, gigantic shape and how they connect or almost connect, our idea of the cursive writing again. Oh, I see something. Be nice. Famous last words. Here we go. Under there, I'm trying to sneak these darks towards this dark a little better. And yeah, let's just be careful. Okay. But the idea is seeing these big connected shapes or nearly connected shapes. That's the thing that should grasp your eye. I don't think this would be as interesting a subject were at midday and all of this is illuminated. It just wouldn't be quite as zippy, I don't think. You'd probably find something else where it would be just as neat. Try to plan so that you know you have big areas of basically light, medium, and dark. Oh gosh, what else here? Get the position of things correct. Get the size of them after that. And then the color, then that's yours to sort of play with. The shapes you could modify a bit, play with a bit. The critical thing is the where is it and how big is it. That's the thing that's always going to stick out like a sore thumb if it isn't right. And just remember that when you see, there's what you see in your eye, which is the scene, and then there's what you see in your mind, particularly when you're focusing on one area or the other, which you inevitably have to do when you paint. When it's in your mind's eye, it's going to tend to be centered and filling the whole frame. So This building is much smaller and way off to the left. If you're looking right at it, it's going to kind of... So you'll have a fight with your eye because your eye knows it's over on this side and your brain is saying, oh, look how big it is. You know, I have to get in there, you know. The doorway is, you know, X feet high or whatever. So just remember to switch your brain or your eyeball.
I thought you were going to say that. Switch your brain. Just remember.
Well, yeah, if you can switch your brain, that'd be a great thing, couldn't it?
It might be. It might be scary.
Just don't get your other brain from Amazon or something, right? So yeah, just remember there's a difference between what happens behind your eyeball and what happens in front of your eyeball. And you have to balance the two. And that's what's going to give you a painting. And the wonderful thing is that no two of us are going to do it identically. So that's what accounts for all the differences in style. And that's why we go to the museum, to see those wonderful differences. So I'm just going to make my beach a little more beach colored. There we go. Just so it was a little bit different. Okay, so hopefully that was fun. And particularly when we were in the drawing stages of this, don't focus on all that stuff. Look for the big lines. Halfway, quarter, 3/4, whatever it appears to be. And look for things like, where is the top of this versus the top of that versus the top of that? So a little lower, a little higher still. 3 things narrow, wide space, 3 things narrow, wide space, then that. Our tendency will be to kind of space these things evenly. The first time through on the drawing, I did that. And you have to watch yourself and catch yourself doing those things. So Patty, Judy, thanks for tuning in. You guys enjoy yourself this weekend. Hope to see some of you either in Mount Pleasant or Cedar Rapids. Cedar Rapids at the Gilded Pear Friday night. Tomorrow night in Mount Pleasant at the Main Street Art Center. So everybody stay sane, stay safe, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.